0.12 milligrams a litre is approximately 10 times lower than the levels added to Australian water supplies. Do you believe water fluoridation is an environmental as well as a health issue?
It absolutely is. In this country, as well as around the world, it's forbidden by law to release large amounts of fluoride from your factory chimneys. And this is why fertiliser factories have scrubbers on their factory chimneys, which removes the fluoride, the mercury, the cadmium, the arsenic, the cyanide and the radioactive elements from the fertiliser, because we don't want those elements going into the soil. So that is the very stuff, along with all of those other nasties that I've mentioned, which is going into our water. Because they're saying, well, you cannot put fluoride into tips, it's too toxic. You mustn't release it into the atmosphere, it's much too toxic. In fact, there was a organisation, a company in Western Australia was fined for releasing fluoride into a river, I believe, a few years ago. So you mustn't release it anywhere, but when it's put into our water supplies, it's magically transformed into a beneficial substance, along with the lead and the cadmium and the cyanide and all the other things, which you are getting along with the fluoride.
Why do you think it is an environmental as well as health issue?
It's a cell toxin. And so anything that is alive that has cells is affected. So whether it's the cells in your brain which are suffering from the effects of the fluoride, and it's been proven in 23 studies in China that fluoride at very low levels, like 0.5 parts per million, which is half of the 1 part per million we get in our water supplies, actually lowers children's IQs. That's 23 studies. And it's been proven that it's harmful to fish. In fact, I believe it will stop a salmon run. I mean, you put it into the water supplies, so then it gets back into the rivers, doesn't it? Because the stuff is released into the rivers. And it's really bad for fish. So if it's bad for fish, it's obviously an environmental toxin. And it's not supposed to be put into rivers. So they dilute it with our water supplies. It's a way of laundering a poison.
So let me get this right. We can't put it into the river.
We can't put it into the air.
The scrubbers are not, the manufacturers are not allowed to put it into a river supply. They're not allowed to dump it in the ocean. No. They're not allowed to put it in the air, but they are allowed to put it into a drinking potable water supply for human consumption.
Yes. And the very people who would have to pay to dispose of it in some way, God knows, would they ship it to the moon or something, they are getting paid for putting poison in our water. And the thing about this, I think one of the reasons why this is happening is because a great many industries in modern society produce fluoride as a byproduct. It started with the aluminium industry and the nuclear industry, and they had to give fluoride a good name. So they did a lot of PR and said it was good for our teeth. But a lot of industries, whether it's steel or glass or soldering, whatever it is, you've got fluoride getting into the atmosphere. In fact, that has now stopped being measured. And I think the authorities don't want to know what we're getting from all sources. We're not just getting it from our water supply, we're not just getting it in our canned food, we're actually getting it from the atmosphere, we're breathing it in. And the plants are breathing it in too. And there's some evidence that plants are now taking up more fluoride than they used to. And they're actually manufacturing toxins because of the fluoride. With fluoride, because so many people have been brainwashed and seen these adverts since they were little, they think they know that it's good, and they think because their children's teeth are better than theirs that the fluoride is doing them good. So you meet grandparents who say, oh yes, and I gave my children fluoride tablets and their teeth are better. But they don't realise that all around the world children's dentition has improved. And it's got nothing to do with fluoride. It has more to do with having better nutrition and things like cheese and cleaning their teeth. And it is an environmental toxin.
What do you do personally to avoid fluoridated water?
We have a rainwater tank, but we don't get fluoridated water because I'm living on a farm and we have untreated water here, but we're not supposed to drink that. And so we can use it for washing our clothes. And if I were living in Warrnambool or another city, I would have a rainwater tank. But then you have the problem, of course, that there are other things in the atmosphere. So you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't, because a lot of pesticides which are sprayed in the atmosphere, they can travel hundreds or thousands of kilometres and end up in people's rainwater tanks because they end up on the roof and they get washed in. And they've got fluoride in them.
And what about food sources that are made with
food
water?
Sources, yes. I mean, the other thing is, say you got a tin of lentils, if you're a lazy cook, well, apart from the bisphenol A, which lines the can, which is poisonous and a hormone disruptor, you're also getting fluoride, which is a hormone disruptor, in the lentils, because when they cook the lentils, they absorb more and more, and the water evaporates off, but the fluoride stays behind. And so as the lentils are cooked, you get more and more of a concentration in that food. And you would have that if you're cooking soup, or if you're cooking meat in the oven, in a gravy or whatever. And the same with all the other processed foods that you get. They're invariably made in places like Melbourne, which have a fluoridated water supply.
I'd just like to clarify something. Perhaps you can clarify this for your audience. Does fluoride get boiled off?
No.
What happens to fluoride when it's cooked or heated or boiled?
Yeah, what happens, say you have in your office one of those tea urns and it's boiling away all day and people just keep topping it up. You're going to get more and more fluoride building up in there. So
do you believe that the Council Water Supply Authority and or the government should cover your expenses incurred during the process of avoiding fluoride in water?
Yes, if people have to buy water filters, it should be covered. Why should the government have the gall to inflict a poison on us, and when we try and avoid it, they say, well, tough titties, you have to pay the costs for your filter?
Are other people you know locally trying to avoid fluoride?
Yes, I know many people who have bought fluoride filters. Unfortunately, as we were talking about earlier, there are a lot of filters on the market which don't genuinely remove the fluoride. And so I think if you have a double osmosis, that will do it. But I think you have to keep renewing the filter system in your filter, because otherwise the fluoride eats through. It can eat through steel. So
my understanding is it's reverse osmosis.
Yes.
And you have to be very careful of the membrane and have it replaced often.
Yes.
Otherwise, the water can back up. And you still get your fluoridated content coming through. So it's important that you use reverse osmosis or distillation. And I know there's a lot of charcoal filters, but charcoal doesn't actually remove fluoride out of the water. And I guess that's the insidious thing. It's actually quite difficult to remove fluoride out of the water. It can't be boiled out, and you have to have the correct filtration for that.
Yeah, so if you boil your kettle, it will remove the chlorine, but it won't remove the fluoride.
Is your local doctor against fluoridation? And you don't need to mention any names, but
my local doctor is, and about 21 doctors in Warrnambool are. In fact, more than that, because the last time I saw my doctor, she said, more people have now joined the list, Gillian. More people have read the evidence and more doctors are against it. So the number's going up all the time. And I just wish that doctors in other towns would follow suit and actually look at the evidence. Be real doctors and be really concerned about what you're giving your patients, what you're allowing your patients to drink, because you are responsible for people's health. That's what we pay doctors for.
So perhaps a bit more spine is needed.
Yes.
A little more courage.
But there's an awful situation going on right now where doctors and dentists who stick up for people's rights to not be force-fed fluoride are being bullied and being threatened and being told you'll be struck off the list as a dentist or whatever if you continue to fight against fluoride.
So what would you say to these people that are then kowtowing, basically, who aren't standing up for the rights of a healthy life and to have our birthright of good health. Why are the criminals winning, it seems?
Yes, we have this situation where doctors, the first thing they learn when they go into doctor school is first do no harm. And the people who are refusing to look at the evidence are going against medical ethics.
Dr. Carney has been widely criticised by Australian and international health, scientific and other professionals. This included a letter demanding the resignation of Dr. Carney sent to the Health Minister for his handling of the fluoride issue. What is your view on Dr. Carney and his department?
I think Dr. Carney doesn't want to know. Can you say a doctor is stupid? You can teach people things, but you can't make them think. And that's my opinion of Dr. Carney. I don't think there's much going on between his ears. And there are more and more people looking at the issue and realising that there is a problem. I just hope that they will allow me to bring a doctor and a dentist to state council meetings to allow them to listen to the evidence. And they can have somebody bring along Dr. Carney if he's got the balls to come along. But he always refuses, and he waits, and the health department waits until people like visiting professors from overseas who've been saying, come and debate this issue, they wait until the person's gone home, and then they come out and say, safe and effective, safe and effective. And they will not, because they cannot. They haven't read the evidence, they don't know the science, they're not cell biologists, they're not people who have gained the Nobel laureate in medicine, and all they know how to say is safe and effective. And they will not listen.
Perhaps I could broach the question that if these people are saying it's safe and effective, they need to produce the evidence that it's safe and effective. In other words, we need to see the studies done that prove
yes, precisely.
it is safe and effective.
And if only, I'm sure, if only people in any political party were able to listen to someone like Paul Connett speak and to debate the issue, they would see how weak and false the so-called science is for fluoridation. The health department are not able to argue, and that's why they refuse to debate this issue. But if we had a situation where we managed to get some of them, twist their arms behind their back, bring them up, right, argue with Paul Connett or whoever is there that's been studying these issues for years, the public would see that this is not a good case for fluoride. It's a case against fluoride. So the evidence is all on the black side. It does so much harm to people because it's a cell toxin. And I remember reading recently about the American Cancer Institute. And someone from the American Cancer Institute was saying that fluoride causes cancer, and it causes it more quickly than any other substance. And if you want to find out all the facts from that, I'll stick it on your website.
Right. So what would you suggest to people that they do to educate themselves about these issues of water fluoridation?
It's very easy. If you're a scientific person, you can look at the scientific studies, and the international studies are available on Paul Connett's site. Professor Paul Connett has made a study of this, and so have many other scientists. And so you can go to fluoridealert.org on the WWW. You can read all the stuff there. You can read stuff which is studies, scientific studies, or you can read stuff which is written so the average man or woman in the street can understand it. And it's so clear.